come down to that decision point, it is very important for me to know how these E2s are rising.
There should be certain factors which can predict that this patient might go for ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome.
Yeah, there would be the factors like, as I briefly mentioned earlier, is the AMH value. So AMH is one, then second is antral follicle count. Before I start with the cycle, I have to know that she is having this many follicles, that more than 10 follicles on either side, which will rise when I'll start the stimulation. So those are the first alarming things. So I have to keep the stimulation on the lower side. And in spite of that, if I get more than 5 or 6 dominant follicles, which are reaching the size of 14, 15 on the third or fourth day of stimulation, followed by some 2, 3 follicles on either side, that is more than 6 follicles on either side, which are lesser than around say 11, 12 millimeters, this is an alarming sign that I have to reduce the dose or keep a watch on the estrogen and then take a decision whether to go ahead or abandon.
Yeah, so we as a pathologist are interested that at what cutoff point do you expect call from us that this is critical value?
Yeah, if I send a sample at follicle size 14 for the estrogen, LH and all, and with some 5 follicles of 14 size or something, that value is going beyond say 1000, I have to know, I have to get a call that how many follicles are there and your E2 is rising with that dilutional effect of that. The correct value of estrogen is to be informed so that I take a decision at that point of reducing the stimulation level or take a further decision whether to go ahead or tell the patient about the further complications.
Yeah.
Transfer or vitrification, that is my very important decision. At least I can do the pickup, prepare the embryos so that the patient doesn't have to undergo the second cycle. But if this value is rising more than 1.4, then I wouldn't transfer those embryos back to her uterus. So that is why that absolute critical value of progesterone is very important for me to know whether I would transfer or I would keep them all in the vitrified form.
Yeah, so this highlights that precision and accuracy in our lab hormonal assay is quite important. Now let us move ahead with the prolactin. Prolactin is a monomer with 23 kilodalton molecular weight. It has one variant of big prolactin and the other one is big prolactin, which is 170 to 170 kilodalton in molecular weight. Because of its increasing molecular weight, it is mostly confined to intravascular spaces and so it is biologically unavailable. But we'll come further and we'll see that this may lead to problem in prolactin assay. So before going to assay, analytical assay, we'll see pre-analytical condition, that is sample collection. So prolactin has circadian and pulsatile rhythm. It has secretory burst at regular interval. Its half-life is 50 minutes. And so we recommend that pooled sample testing, which is done 20 to 30 minutes apart, should be done for the prolactin assay. But here question comes to my mind that every walk-in patient to my lab, should I ask for the pooled sample testing? Or how many times do you offer patient pooled sample testing? Audience can participate in the question answer session or they can give their inputs wherever necessary they feel.
Prolactin is definitely a very much vulnerable hormone. So it's always better that we check the pooled sample so that we get a correct value. And it's important to differentiate between the macroadenoma also if we are getting the higher side. So rather than putting the patient through MRI, I think I would do first a pooled sample and then take a decision, sir.
Yeah. So this data of our lab for last 2 months.
Sorry. About this prolactin thing, prolactin is clearly a stress-related hormone, and even the stress of a prick of an injection of phlebotomy can raise the prolactin significantly. In my practice, 99% of high prolactins, genuinely high prolactins, are drug-induced. Okay, they have nothing to do with macroadenoma. Macroadenoma causing prolactin elevation is extremely uncommon, extremely uncommon. So the first cause is drugs, and we have learned to again and again and again pester the patient to determine what drugs they're taking, and I'm telling you 99 out of 100 cases you will find the offending drug. Most of the offending drugs are these so-called anti-acidity medications which are used, either metoclopramide, domperidone, anti-acidity medicines, and now lot of people use this levosulpiride, which is used along with this anti-acidity medicines. So all this pantocid L, where that L suffix comes, it is levosulpiride. Levosulpiride is an antipsychotic and invariably causes elevation of prolactin. There are a large number of other drugs which cause it as well. So that's number one. Number two, you stop the drug and you'll find that in 10-15 days the prolactin will come back to normal. The second most important cause of high prolactin is hypothyroidism. It's not still prolactin and secreting adenoma, so that's the second important cause. And borderline prolactins, typically say between 20 to 50, 60, will often come down if you do a pooled prolactin testing, because they are often because of a acute rise due to testing.
Stress
So
or testing.
it makes sense not to rush into MRIs and start cabergoline and all kinds of things, because they don't need it. So it's best to first do a pooled prolactin if you find a borderline high prolactin, and then proceed further.
Yeah. So whenever patient comes to us in panic stage, we can always recommend that they should go for pool sample testing. This is our data of last 2 months, which shows that whatever cases we have studied or patients we have assayed in last 2 months, almost 80% of them fall into normal value. So if we ask pool sample testing for each and every patient, then we are unnecessarily wasting time of our patient and energy of ours. So those who are in other 20%, that is on higher side, we can always ask them to come back again and do pool sample testing to avoid imaging technique and further mismanagement. While performing prolactin assay, why do we get some erroneous values rather than apart from this drug history and other causes? So these are three main interfering factors in prolactin assay. High dose hook effect, which is because of antigen excess, may give rise to falsely low values. Heterophil antibodies interfere with prolactin assay, giving rise to false positive results. And the most important is macroprolactin. This macroprolactin give false positive results because it is noted in almost 26% of cases that macroprolactin may interfere with the prolactin assay, giving rise to high prolactin value. In such incidences, there will be biochemical macroprolactinemia or there will be biochemical prolactinemia, but patient may not be having or at least symptoms of hyperprolactinemia. In such cases, we should consider the possibility of macroprolactin. This is the performance of currently available all standard third generation immunoassay, that though they are standard and very specific, in prolactin there is macroprolactin interference in varying degrees in all these assays. If we consider gel filtration technique, that is at the last bottom slide, which is gold standard for the macroprolactin estimation.